118th contact, Thursday, December 7, 1978, 3:55 p.m., pages 330, 335. Quetzal says your appearance doesn't exactly witness to the best well-being, my friend. Semyaza says I find that too. You seem to have great pains. Billy says it isn't so bad. Semyaza says your words contradict your appearance. We know very well, however, that your health leaves very much to be desired. You are ill, very ill even, quite apart from your new injury, which we will look at immediately. Billy says, oh, I myself know well enough that it is very bad for me, I feel it every day. Probably nothing more can be done about that. My time, too, has to run out someday. But on the other hand, my head might already be in the best order again in a short time. It is, indeed, only a light concussion, and it just gives me some headaches. Semyaza says sure, it is, indeed, true that also your time is not unlimited and will come to an end one day. But that this time must be shorter by about a half, just because you were driven into a nervous physical destruction through the irrationality of various group members or former members that might be very much more than just of incorrectness and of the irresponsible self-addiction of the fallible ones. Billy says, is it absolutely necessary to broadcast how many years of life I still have before me? Semyaza says I haven't mentioned your predetermined age exactly but rather sufficiently, in order to let the fallible ones see what they have destroyed in their reckless and selfish irrationality. This does, indeed, sound unfriendly and harsh, but it corresponds to the truth, unfortunately. Billy says still, I don't think it's good that we talk about it. Quetzal says it wouldn't be of correctness if we wouldn't do this now. These things must be discussed once. Perhaps these facts will finally bring the irrational ones and fallible ones to reason, as maybe through these they will recognize the depth of their defectiveness, according to which, under certain conditions, a few things could still become good with regard to the continued existence of the group, in spite of everything. Billy says to tell the truth, I think nothing of that. I know this and have experienced it. Namely, that reason is only accepted by certain human beings when the harsh reality reaches their own lives. But as long as it is only the life of another, so long does one not worry about it. Only a few really do that, I mean, worry about the life of another. Quetzal says unfortunately, that is of correctness, but still, we hope that our words don't miss their effect in this case because they represent more than just a simple truth. Billy says just don't be disappointed over the effect because it will certainly turn out quite differently than you imagine. I know the human beings of Earth better than you. For my part, I would be silent about these things. Semyaza says we don't do that, and we have good reasons for it. Billy says as you wish. Now tell me, my son, could you find out something because of that which I communicated to Semyaza by way of thought? Quetzal says it was possible for me, yes, but before I inform you about my results, I would like you to describe the incident to me personally. Perhaps I've overlooked something in my observations of the past. Translator's note: the following portion was taken from page 218 of And Still They Fly. Billy says as you wish. So Monday night, December 4 at 8:53 p.m. I drove my wife, Calliope, up the hill near the garage in Madeleine's Sunbeam when suddenly the motor orders the gas pedal got stuck. Despite my efforts, I was no longer able to hold the rattler trap on a straight course on the icy roadway. Calliope sat behind the wheel for the first time, which, I must say, created quite a problem for me on the passenger side regarding the steering. Though I tried to hit the brakes through my wife's legs, I was unable to do so, nor was I able to turn off the engine because I was lying half in front of the steering wheel and had to steer. In addition to that, I didn't want my wife to be flung into the windshield as the rattler trap skidded to the right on the ice just a few meters away from the corner of the house, and then crashed into the corner of the house at about 65 kilometers 40 miles per hour. The motor continued to roar at full speed after impact, whereupon I turned the ignition off after recovering somewhat from the impact. I had been thrown against the steering wheel, injuring my right eye, and then against the front windshield, hitting my skull. Afterward, I inspected the car with Jacobus because we wanted to find out why the gas pedal had suddenly jammed and could not be released, causing the old heap to gather speed and take off like a torpedo. That's when we finally discovered the hidden defect. The gas pedal was jammed over the brake pressure cable, where it must have been forcibly pushed, causing it to malfunction. This jamming would have eventually worn through the brake lubricating pressure cable. And you know quite well what that means. Semyaza says it means that the brakes would have failed. I had Quetzal explain that to me. Quetzal says that is correct. I do not understand why you did not operate the clutch next to the brakes. You would have brought the vehicle to a stop that way. Of course, your wife was sitting behind the wheel for the first time, as you said. I understand. Now, your story coincides with my observation of the past, which corresponds with yours, at least as far as I am able to understand. As far as my observation of the past is concerned regarding the gas pedal and the flow of gas, a regrettable fact was established. From what I was able to see, 3 dark figures worked on it and carried out this dangerous manipulation for the sole purpose of destroying your life. These people cold-bloodedly accepted the fact that the lives of other persons would also be endangered. But with respect to this, my friend, we warned you months ago, and at our last meeting, that you should be very alert at night. Your enemies have been preparing very unpleasant things for some time. But you did not listen. The result of this is what you have now experienced. The incident could have easily cost you your life. Translator's note: this concludes the portion retrieved from And Still They Fly. Billy says, what should we do, then, if we aren't enough people? Should we conjure up some? Quetzal says we know about the lack of persons, which is why we also told you recently that 8 should become resident in the center. Billy says but he will not agree to that, using various excuses. Semyaza says they are all null and void and also have no meaning whatsoever. If he expends only half of the sense of duty, in which he always prides himself, then he will be living with you all very soon, in order to share your tasks, and indeed, finally in a sincere and loyal form. Should he not do this, then he is not worthy of further presence in the group, which we have often stated, however. Billy says that won't please him very much, and as I know him, he will certainly feel insulted by your words unjustifiably again, as this is his nature, because he really doesn't think about that. Quetzal says that is a very deplorable characteristic of him, which has no justification at all, however. He should finally strive to become a mature and sincere human being in his thoughts and actions. Billy says man oh man, that will boost his rage. But let's leave that and tell me, what's the deal with the 3 dark figures, of which you have spoken? Quetzal says it concerns 3 men of the group of Brazilians, known under the name, Men in Black. One of the 3, who were with you all, monitored your center from last Friday night to the early morning hours of Saturday, while the 2 others carried out the manipulation on the vehicle, in which you and your wife had the accident. Afterwards, they drove away in a large, black vehicle. Billy says aha, and where are the birds now? Quetzal says they are already back in their base in security. Billy says they are, indeed, rather nicely careful. Quetzal says you know very well why, but in the future, you should follow our advice and monitor everything well. Billy says you have well said it. By the way, also Engelbert complained to me yesterday that he has quite lousy dreams. Do you know anything about this, that some outside influences could be at work there? Quetzal says with certainty, that is not the case. I suppose that Engelbert has complained about his own such dreams? Billy says yes. Quetzal says that was my assumption. His dreams are likely triggered by the very deplorable incidents of recent weeks and months, which produced an overload in him, which he is simply no longer able to bear. Everything accumulated in him until it led to an explosion, which apparently only pushed itself to the surface through his dreams, fortunately. This is completely natural but also harmful and dangerous over time, if he doesn't try to bring himself back into his own power nervously and mentally. This shouldn't be too difficult for him because he usually brings such attacks from the subconscious very well under control. With the whole happening, he should just be very careful that his manner attacked by this doesn't spread to his family members or to the group members, as this is frequently the case in such cases, because due to such phenomena, the behavior towards fellow human beings usually changes in an aggressive form, which the fellow human beings then simply do not accept and do not cope with because it is, after all, an unjustified attack. But he can be reassured concerning this, that truly no outside influences whatsoever appear at present or have appeared in the last time, apart from the regrettable issues surrounding the vehicle. But now, my friend, I would still like to see what kind of damage you suffered on impact with the vehicle. Sit down here. Billy says, damn, you simply cannot let it go. Okay then. Quetzal says, I've already suspected this. Of course, you play down your injury, as usual. This isn't as light as you said. There has been a rather strong concussion of your brain, which must cause you great pains. Although it is not dangerous, you could still suffer from severe headaches in the future if you don't give enough attention to healing. You shouldn't move too much and should also sleep a lot, so that you have good rest. We ourselves can't do anything about this, unfortunately, because in this case, the healing only lies with sufficient rest. Billy says, I also know that, my son, but you'll still give me the report today, right? Quetzal says that would probably be best, so that afterwards, you have your rest. But after that, we will first get in touch with you again once your injury is healed. Billy says, calmly, do that, my son, then I can take a little vacation once and continue writing my fairy tales. Semyaza says you should refrain from that because it isn't good for you and your condition. Quetzal says that is a true word. Beware for the time being of stringent work and seek for yourself the necessary rest, which you also otherwise need extremely. Now farewell, my friend, and follow my instructions. Billy says, I will, at least for as long as it still lasts. I really feel very miserable. Quetzal says that also isn't to be expected differently in your condition. Now farewell, my friend. Billy says, bye, General, and also all love to you, girl. Bye. Semyaza says, till we meet again, and please, take care of yourself. Billy says, I will. I promise you that. Bye-bye. Ah yes, I still have a slip of paper with the question. It was on the 15th of August, 1976, an airplane disappeared in South America, which took off in a city by the name of Quito. Now, the rumor goes that the machine had been abducted by extraterrestrials, as one writes here. It is also written here, however, that there is speculation of a hijacking by a drug cartel. Do you know about what really happened with the airplane? Quetzal says yes, the deplorable incident is well known to us. It neither concerns a hijacking of the flight apparatus by a drug cartel nor an abduction by extraterrestrials. The aircraft crashed at nearly 6,30 meters of altitude into the volcanic mountain Chimborazo in the Andes in Ecuador. There were about 60 human beings on board the flight machine, who all met death upon its crash. Billy says, I myself thought that the abduction story is nonsense. This remains persistent, however. The proof for the crash of the airplane will probably take time, if clarity is ever created over it at all. Quetzal says that might actually be questionable because human beings won't go to the crash site of the aircraft so quickly, unless it would result by a special stroke of fate, by what means the debris would be found. Billy says I think so too. And that's it now. Then I can now pass on your explanation. Farewell to both of you, and dear thanks for the information. The end. 118th Contact, Thursday, December 7, 1978, 3:55 p.m., pages 330, 335. Quetzal says your appearance doesn't exactly witness to the best well-being, my friend. Semyaza says I find that too. You seem to have great pains. Billy says it isn't so bad. The fallible ones see what they have destroyed in their reckless and selfish irrationality. This does, indeed, sound unfriendly and harsh, but it corresponds to the truth, unfortunately. Billy says still, I don't think it's good that we talk about it. Quetzal says it wouldn't be of correctness if we wouldn't do this now. These things must be discussed once. Perhaps these facts, physical destruction through the irrationality of various group members or former members, that might be very much more than just of incorrectness and of the irresponsible self-addiction of the fallible ones. Billy says is it absolutely necessary to broadcast how many years of life I still have before me? Semyaza says I haven't mentioned your predetermined age exactly but rather sufficiently, in order to let the run out someday. But on the other hand, my head might already be in the best order again in a short time. It is, indeed, only a light concussion, and it just gives me some headaches. Semyaza says sure, it is, indeed, true that also your time is not unlimited and will come to an end one day. But that this time must be shorter by about a half, just because you were driven into a nervous. Semyaza says your words contradict your appearance. We know very well, however, that your health leaves very much to be desired. You are ill, very ill even, quite apart from your new injury, which we will look at immediately. Billy says oh, I myself know well enough that it is very bad for me, I feel it every day. Probably nothing more can be done about that. My time, too, has to